Look at this fat black nobody pretending this land belongs to him, the slick-haired man snarled, pressing a knife to Zeke Holt's throat as the barn behind them exploded in a roar of flames. Heat rolled off the burning wood, painting the man's gold chain in flickering firelight, while his crew smirked behind him, rifles resting casually on their shoulders. He stepped closer, breath thick with arrogance. This little farm ends tonight. And you get to watch it die. One of the enforcers kicked a flaming beam toward Zeke's boots. None of them knew the man they were mocking once hunted men like them for a living. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The morning sun painted long shadows across Zeke's organic farm as he walked between the neat rows of seedlings. His large frame moved with careful precision, checking each tender shoot. The sweet smell of Georgia soil rose up with every step of his work boots. 20 years of working this land had taught him to cherish these quiet moments. A bead of sweat rolled down his dark skin as he crouched to examine a struggling tomato plant. His rough fingers, gentle despite their size, tucked fresh soil around its base. "There you go, little one," he whispered. "Just needed some extra care." The rumble of engines shattered the peace. Zeke straightened up, his 6'4" frame tensing as 3 black pickup trucks roared down his access road, kicking up clouds of dust. They weren't local vehicles. Too new, too clean. They rolled to a stop in a deliberate triangle formation that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Men piled out, 8 of them. Sharp suits that didn't belong on a farm. One stepped forward, shorter than the others, but carrying himself like he owned the world. His expensive shoes collected Georgia red clay as he walked straight at Zeke. "Morning, friend," the man said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Seems there's been a misunderstanding about this property." Zeke planted his feet firmly. "No misunderstanding. This is my land. Has been for 20 years. The man's smile tightened. "See, that's where you're wrong. This land's been marked for development. We're here to reclaim it." "Reclaim?" Zeke's voice stayed level, but his hands clenched. "I've got the deed. Paid every tax. Grown every crop. There's nothing to reclaim." 2 men circled behind him. Zeke tracked their movement without turning his head, an old habit he couldn't shake. The leader's fake smile vanished. "Listen, old man, we can do this easy or hard. But this land, it's ours now. Borelli family's expanding operations, and your farm's in the way." "I know the Borelli name," Zeke said quietly. "And you've made a mistake coming here." The first punch came from behind. Amateur move. Zeke shifted, letting it glance off his shoulder. But there were too many. They swarmed him, fists and boots finding their marks. He managed to throw 2 men off before something cracked against the back of his head. Zeke hit the ground hard. Through blurring vision, he watched them pull gas cans from the trucks. "No!" he gasped, trying to push himself up. A boot slammed into his ribs. "Light it up!" the leader ordered. The smell of gasoline filled the air. They started with his barn, the beautiful old structure his wife had loved so much. Flames caught the dry wood with a hungry roar. They moved methodically, spreading fire through his equipment shed, his fields of young crops. Zeke dragged himself toward his porch, each breath stabbing his chest. Smoke began to fill the sky, thick and black. His eyes stung, tears cutting tracks through the dirt and blood on his face. "Don't forget the message," the leader called out. "Make sure our friend understands how things work around here now." 2 men grabbed Zeke's arms, hauling him up to watch, as flames devoured everything he'd built. The leader stepped close, grabbing Zeke's jaw. "See that? That's what happens to people who don't cooperate. But don't worry. Sheriff's got this covered. Tragic accident. Probably some homeless people camping where they shouldn't. They dropped him back in the dirt. Truck doors slammed, engines roared to life. "Welcome to the new order, farmer." The leader's voice drifted back as they peeled away, leaving destruction in their wake. Zeke lay there, the heat of the fires baking his skin. His consciousness wavered as smoke filled his lungs. Everything hurt, his body, his pride, but most of all, his heart. This land had been his refuge, his fresh start. Now it was burning. The wail of sirens grew in the distance. He tried to call out, but could only cough. Red and blue lights flashed through the smoke. Car doors opened and closed. "Oh my God!" A deputy's voice carried across the yard, too loud, too rehearsed. "Mr. Holt!" "Are you all right?" Zeke reached out a shaking hand as footsteps approached. More voices joined in, all hitting their marks like actors in a bad play. "Someone call an ambulance! Look at all this damage! Must have been an accident! Thank God we got here so fast!" Their false concern wrapped around him like another layer of smoke. Through swollen eyes, Zeke watched them perform their little drama, making sure to document everything just so. Perfect witnesses to the official story that would bury the truth. He let his hand fall back to the dirt. Years of experience told him exactly what this was. A coordinated attack with law enforcement already in the pocket. The speed of the deputies' arrival, their practiced shock, the careful way they were already building the narrative. It all spoke to corruption running deep. The Georgia sun climbed higher, casting harsh light on the smoldering ruins of his farm. As deputies scurried around him with their notepads and cameras, carefully documenting the lie they'd help perpetuate. Smoke continued to paint the sky black, carrying with it the ashes of his peaceful life. The paramedics lifted Zeke onto the stretcher with practiced care, their movements gentle but efficient. He winced as the motion sent fresh waves of pain through his battered body. The morning sun had climbed higher, harsh light illuminating the destruction around him. Smoke still rose from the smoldering ruins of his barn, carrying the acrid smell of burned wood and chemicals. "Easy there, Mr. Holt," one paramedic said, securing the straps. "We'll get you checked out properly." A patrol car pulled up, its tires crunching over broken glass and debris. Sheriff Clint Maddox stepped out, his badge catching the sunlight. He adjusted his tan uniform and strode over with the confident swagger of a man who owned the ground he walked on. "Ezekiel," Maddox drawled, pulling out a small notebook. "Terrible business. Just terrible. Looks like squatters might have set up camp, started a fire that got out of hand." He clicked his pen, face arranged in a mask of concern. "We'll investigate this thoroughly. Don't you worry." A deputy handed Zeke a bottle of water. His throat burned as he sipped, watching through swollen eyes as the sheriff's men moved around the scene. Something felt wrong. They snapped photos half-heartedly, barely documenting the widespread damage. Not one of them examined the deep tire tracks near the entry gate, tracks still wet with spilled gasoline. "Sheriff!" Zeke's voice came out rough. "Those weren't squatters. There were men in suits, 8 of them. They said—" Now, Maddox cut him off, patting Zeke's shoulder with false sympathy. "You took quite a knock to the head. Let's not jump to conclusions. We'll handle the investigation by the book." The paramedics loaded Zeke into the ambulance. As they drove away, he caught glimpses of deputies through the back windows, standing around and chatting instead of working the scene. Their casual attitude made his stomach turn. The local clinic was small but efficient. They treated his cuts, wrapped his bruised ribs, and monitored him for smoke inhalation. By evening, they cleared him to leave. His neighbor, Tom Watson, gave him a ride home in his rusty pickup. "Jesus, Zeke," Tom said as they pulled up to the farm. "What the hell happened?" Zeke didn't answer. The setting sun cast long shadows across his ruined land. The barn was a blackened skeleton. His equipment shed had collapsed. The spring seedlings were ash. 20 years of work destroyed in a single morning. "Thanks for the ride," he said quietly. "I've got it from here." "You sure? I could help." "I'm sure." Zeke's tone left no room for argument. Once alone, he began methodically searching the property. His FBI training kicked in automatically. Document everything. Preserve evidence. Establish patterns. The attackers had been thorough but not professional. They'd left traces. Near the barn's foundation, he found cotton rags soaked in gasoline, carefully placed to ensure maximum spread of the fire. Boot prints in multiple sizes tracked through the ash. Cigarette butts from expensive brands dotted the ground. This was no accident. This was a calculated attack. Zeke gathered the evidence in plastic bags, wincing as his injuries protested the movement. The sun had set by the time he finished, leaving him standing in the dark amid the ruins of his life. He drove his backup truck to the sheriff's station, evidence bags tucked safely under the seat. The building was quiet, most deputies gone for the day. Sheriff Maddox sat in his office, feet up on his desk, phone pressed to his ear. Through the window, Zeke heard fragments of conversation. "Taken care of. No evidence. Stick to the story." Maddox looked up, saw him standing there, and quickly ended the call. "Mr. Holt." The sheriff's welcoming smile didn't reach his eyes. Come in. How are you feeling?" Zeke placed the evidence bags on the desk. "Found these at my farm. Gasoline-soaked rags, deliberately placed. This wasn't squatters." Maddox barely glanced at the bags. "Now, Ezekiel, we've been over this. You're upset, understandably so, but let's not manufacture conspiracy theories. This is evidence of arson." "Is it?" Maddox's voice turned cold. "Looks like garbage to me. Probably blown in from somewhere else. We're handling the investigation, Mr. Holt. Best leave it to the professionals." "The professionals?" Zeke's voice stayed level despite the anger burning in his chest. "Your deputies didn't even photograph the tire tracks. Didn't interview any witnesses. Didn't test for accelerants." "That's enough." Maddox stood, his chair scraping back. "I understand you're distraught, but I won't have you questioning our methods. Go home, Mr. Holt. Get some rest. Let us do our jobs." He swept the evidence bags into his trash can with one motion. The message was clear. Nothing Zeke brought would matter. The investigation was already settled. Zeke drove home slowly, his headlights cutting through the darkness. In his rearview mirror, he watched Maddox's cruiser pull out of the station and follow him halfway. The sheriff turned off at the county line, but the meaning was clear. You're being watched. Standing in his driveway, Zeke watched the patrol car's taillights disappear into the night. The calm that settled over him wasn't acceptance. It was something harder, colder, born from years of seeing justice twisted by corrupt men with badges. He knew this game. He'd played it before, from the other side. The night air carried the lingering smell of smoke and ash. Somewhere in the darkness, crickets chirped, carrying on as if the world hadn't changed. But it had. Everything had changed. The morning sun cast long shadows across Zeke's weathered porch as he sat in his old rocking chair, a chipped mug of black coffee warming his hands. His body ached from yesterday's beating, but his mind stayed sharp, processing every detail of the attack. The coffee tasted bitter and burnt. He'd forgotten to clean the pot properly, but he barely noticed. Birds called from the scorched trees, their songs a stark contrast to the destruction below. Zeke's gaze swept over his ruined fields, marking each section of devastation. The irrigation system melted. Storage sheds reduced to ash. 20 years of careful farming obliterated in hours. His neighbor's rooster crowed in the distance, reminding him he needed supplies. The attack had destroyed his food stores along with everything else. Zeke stood slowly, his muscles protesting, and walked to his backup truck, an old Ford he kept running for emergencies. The engine coughed to life on the third try. The drive into town followed familiar back roads, past fields and farmhouses he knew by heart. Jackson's general store would have what he needed. As he approached the town limits, movement near the abandoned quick stop caught his eye. A black SUV sat behind the building, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. Zeke's instincts, honed by years of FBI work, sparked to life. He pulled onto a service road about 50 yards away, cutting his engine. The position gave him a clear view while keeping him hidden behind a stand of pine trees. Sheriff Maddox's patrol car sat next to the SUV. The sheriff himself stood talking to a man Zeke recognized from yesterday, one of the suited figures who'd watched his farm burn. The man's expensive suit and confident stance marked him as someone important. A Borelli lieutenant, not a common thug. Zeke's hand moved automatically to his jacket pocket, pulling out his phone. He opened the camera app, zooming in as much as the technology allowed. The image was grainy but clear enough. The lieutenant handed Maddox a thick envelope. The sheriff tucked it into his uniform jacket without counting, the gesture of a man who knew exactly what he was getting. "You corrupt son of a bitch," Zeke whispered, his fingers steady as he recorded the exchange. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes. No handshakes, no lengthy conversation. Just business as usual between criminals. The SUV pulled away first, followed by Maddox's cruiser a careful few minutes later. Rage built in Zeke's chest, a cold, familiar pressure he hadn't felt in years. The pieces clicked together with brutal clarity. The sheriff hadn't just failed to investigate, he'd helped plan the attack. Probably told the Borellis which farm would make an easy target, never knowing its owner's history. Zeke's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he drove home, his shopping trip forgotten. The truck's tires kicked up dust on his driveway as he parked. Without hesitation, he walked to his bedroom closet and pulled up the loose floorboard he'd installed years ago. A metal trunk lay in the space beneath, sealed with a combination lock he'd never forgotten. The numbers clicked into place. 72294, his wife's birthday. The lid creaked open, releasing the smell of gun oil and old leather. His FBI credentials lay on top, the badge still shining despite years of storage. Beside it, his service weapon rested in its holster, cleaned and oiled before being locked away. A combat knife, wickedly sharp, sat in its sheath. 3 encrypted flash drives, labeled only with Black River Ops, contained enough evidence to bury a dozen crime families. Zeke lifted out a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with names, dates, and locations written in his precise hand. The memories flooded back as he read. 6 years with the Organized Crime Task Force. 3 years leading Black River operations. Countless nights surveillance, building cases, watching criminals walk free because someone higher up got paid off. The final betrayal, his own supervisor selling information to the mob, nearly getting Zeke killed in an ambush. He'd survived, but the agency buried the incident. His supervisor took early retirement with a full pension. Zeke walked away, trading his badge for a farmer's life. He'd thought he'd found peace here, working the land, honoring his wife's memory. The photos came next. Crime scenes, surveillance shots, faces of men who thought they were untouchable until Zeke proved them wrong. At the bottom lay a final picture. Zeke and his wife Sarah on their front porch, her smile radiant even as cancer drained her strength. She'd loved this farm, seen it as their chance to build something honest after years in the shadows. A stack of burner phones, each wrapped in plastic, waited beneath the photos. Next to them, a small laptop containing backdoor access to databases he wasn't supposed to know about. The tools of his former trade, preserved like insects in amber. Each item carried weight beyond its physical presence. The badge meant authority, perverted by greed. The guns represented power turned against the innocent. The drives held secrets that could topple empires of corruption. Together, they told the story of a man who'd fought monsters until the monsters won. The trunk's contents smelled of dust and regret, of violence delayed but never forgotten. Zeke ran his fingers over the badge's smooth surface. Sarah had polished it every month, proud of what it meant, what he did. "You protect people," she'd said. "That matters." He looked out his bedroom window at the scorched earth that had been their dream. In the distance, storm clouds gathered, purple and heavy with unseasonable rain. Lightning flickered inside them, nature's warning of power about to be unleashed. Zeke closed the trunk with careful hands, each item left in its place. Thunder rumbled across the horizon, vibrating through the floorboards beneath his feet. Evening crept across Zeke's land as the first fat raindrops struck his shoulders. The water hissed against still warm ashes, releasing wisps of steam from the scorched earth. He walked the perimeter of his property, phone in hand, documenting everything with the methodical precision he'd once used at crime scenes. Click. The barn's charred skeleton, support beams cracked and blackened. Click. Deep tire tracks cutting through his southwest field, filled now with muddy water. Click. The remains of his tractor, reduced to a hulk of melted metal and rubber. Each photo accompanied by precise notes in his phone. Time, location, angle, identifying details. The rain fell harder, soaking through his jacket, but Zeke kept working. Old habits resurfaced with each step. He found himself instinctively noting lines of sight, potential surveillance positions, defensive weaknesses. The farmer's eyes fell away, replaced by the tactical assessment of a veteran field agent. Inside his kitchen, Zeke cleared the table and laid out his laptop. The screen's glow cut through the growing darkness as he pulled up maps of the surrounding county. His fingers moved across the keyboard, muscle memory unlocking access to transportation databases he shouldn't still be able to reach. "Let's see what you've been up to," he muttered, cross-referencing truck registrations with known Borelli front companies. Patterns emerged in the data. Increased commercial traffic along specific rural routes. New property purchases clustered around key intersections. Storage facilities changing hands through shell companies. He plotted each data point on the map, creating a web of criminal activity. The truth crystallized. His farm sat at the center of a planned trafficking corridor. The Borellis were expanding their operation, pushing into rural Georgia, where law enforcement was sparse and easily bought. They needed his land, not for the soil, but for its location. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the kitchen in stark bursts. Thunder followed, drowning out the tap of rain on his roof. Zeke's eyes burned from staring at the screen, but he kept working. He marked 3 properties within 20 miles that showed signs of Borelli activity. A recently purchased warehouse, an abandoned gas station with unusual night traffic, and a trucking company that had changed owners twice in 3 months. Perfect surveillance positions, he said to himself, remembering stakeouts from his FBI days. The warehouse offered clear views of highway traffic. The gas station controlled a key intersection. The trucking company could explain away suspicious vehicle movements. At 11 o'clock, Zeke switched focus to securing his home. He retrieved motion sensors from the trunk, old FBI equipment he'd never returned. The batteries still held charge. He positioned them carefully, 2 covering the driveway, 3 along the tree line, 2 more watching the back approaches. Empty tin cans became improvised alarms, strung together with fishing line across likely entry points. He positioned them high enough to catch an intruder's chest or neck, rather than their feet. The setup was crude but effective. He'd used similar tricks during undercover operations in South America. Zeke checked his windows next, reinforcing locks and marking clear fields of fire. The house wasn't ideal for defense, too many vulnerable points, but he could work with it. He made mental notes of furniture to move, barriers to create, escape routes to maintain. Just before midnight, he did one final perimeter check. The rain had settled into a steady drumbeat, reducing visibility but improving his audio detection range. Water dripped from his cap as he tested the motion sensors, each one responding with a soft chirp through the receiver in his pocket. Back in the kitchen, Zeke made fresh coffee and spread his maps across the table again. Red marks indicated confirmed Borelli locations. Blue showed suspected properties. Yellow highlighted routes and choke points. The pattern was clear now. They'd been setting this up for months, maybe years. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the ache of old injuries mixed with fresh bruises. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, his ruined fields stretched into darkness, the rain washing away ash but not memory. Each drop striking his roof reminded him of the sound of fists hitting flesh, of flames consuming his life's work. Zeke's fingers traced the path of Borelli expansion across his map. They'd moved carefully, slowly, building their network piece by piece. Professional, methodical. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed he was just another farmer, someone who could be frightened away or eliminated. They hadn't done their research, hadn't dug deep enough to find the sealed records, the classified operations, the years of experience hunting men exactly like them. They'd brought violence to his door thinking he was defenseless, not realizing they'd awakened something far more dangerous than simple revenge. The coffee cooled untouched beside him as Zeke studied his tactical notes. Tomorrow he'd begin surveillance, gathering evidence just like he had hundreds of times before. He'd track their movements, document their operations, identify their weaknesses. The skills were still there, waiting beneath the surface like banked coals ready to ignite. Rain drummed against the windows, nature's rhythm matching his focused concentration. The storm would help cover his movements when he started monitoring their properties. Bad weather meant fewer witnesses, less chance of being spotted setting up observation posts. Zeke glanced at his burned fields, barely visible in the darkness beyond his window. His voice came out soft but steel-hard in the quiet kitchen. "You attacked the wrong man." Gray darkness cloaked the pre-dawn hours as Zeke pulled dark clothes from his closet. Black cargo pants, navy long-sleeve shirt, dark boots, clothes chosen to blend with shadows. He moved with deliberate quiet, checking each item in his small tool bag. Lockpicks, zip ties, the hidden camera he'd pulled from his FBI trunk, and a small flashlight. The mirror caught his reflection as he dressed. His broad frame filled the doorway, muscles still solid despite the years of farming. The bruises from the beating were fading to yellow-green across his arms and chest. Each mark fueled his focus. Zeke slipped out his back door at 4:30 a.m., dew-heavy grass soaking his boots. The abandoned Thompson Mill loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the lightening eastern sky. He'd picked this target after noticing increased nighttime activity. Trucks coming and going, lights in windows that should be dark. He parked his truck half a mile away, concealed behind overgrown bushes. The walk-in gave him time to survey the area. No security cameras on the perimeter. 2 vehicles parked behind the building, a black SUV and a pickup truck. The mill's loading dock door was cracked open slightly, spilling yellow light into the pre-dawn gloom. Moving like a shadow, Zeke circled the building. His size belied his stealth. Years of FBI training had taught him how to move his bulk silently. He found his entry point, a rusted fire escape leading to a second-floor window. The lock was broken, probably by local kids years ago. The window creaked slightly as he eased it open. Zeke froze, listening. Voices drifted up from below, accompanied by the clink of bottles and rough laughter. He slipped inside, careful to distribute his weight evenly across the old floorboards. That fat farmer's face when we lit up his barn. A harsh voice carried clearly through gaps in the floor. Like a stupid cow watching the slaughterhouse door close. More laughter. Zeke's hands clenched involuntarily, but he kept moving. The mission came first. Evidence before action. Boss says we're expanding the whole corridor now, another voice added. That land's perfect. Remote enough nobody asks questions when trucks roll through at night. Zeke found his first camera position, a ceiling beam with a clear view of the main floor. He secured the tiny lens, checking the wireless feed on his phone. Perfect coverage of their makeshift office space, filing cabinets, a desk, what looked like accounting ledgers. The voices grew louder. Hey, grab those manifests from upstairs. Vincent wants them at the meeting tomorrow. Footsteps on the stairs. Zeke moved quickly toward the window, but a floorboard groaned beneath his weight. The footsteps paused. Someone up here? Zeke pressed against the wall as a Borelli enforcer reached the top of the stairs. The man was young, muscled, with a pistol tucked in his waistband. He moved cautiously through the gloom, hand reaching for his weapon. A shaft of pre-dawn light caught Zeke's shadow. The enforcer spun, eyes widening in recognition. What the fu— Zeke moved first, crossing the space in 2 long strides. His hand clamped over the man's mouth before he could shout, other arm locking around his chest. The enforcer thrashed, reaching for his gun. Zeke drove his knee into the back of the man's leg, taking them both down hard. They crashed into old wooden pallets, splintering boards. The enforcer's elbow caught Zeke's ribs. Zeke absorbed the blow, maintaining his grip. Experience told him to end this fast before the noise drew attention. The enforcer broke free, scrambling for his weapon. Zeke surged forward, shoulder driving into the man's midsection. They slammed into a support beam. The gun clattered away into darkness. Fists flew now. The enforcer was trained, throwing precise combinations. But Zeke had size, strength, and decades of hand-to-hand combat experience. He weathered the blows, waiting for his opening. It came when the enforcer overextended a right hook. Zeke stepped inside the punch, grabbing the man's arm, his other hand locked behind the enforcer's head. In one fluid motion, he drove his knee up while pulling down. The impact was brutal. A wet crack, as nose met kneecap. The enforcer staggered. Zeke kept moving, years of training taking over. His massive fist connected with the man's temple. Another blow followed to the kidney. The enforcer crumpled against the wall, blood streaming from his nose. "Who?" the man gasped. "Who are you?" Zeke's only answer was a final strike that sent the enforcer into unconsciousness. He quickly zip-tied the man's hands and feet, then dragged him behind some old equipment. The entire fight had lasted less than a minute. Voices called from below. "Tony? You find those papers?" Moving fast now, Zeke snapped photos of license plates through the window. He retrieved his hidden camera's memory card, leaving the camera in place. The voices grew closer. Footsteps on the stairs. Zeke slipped out the window onto the fire escape. The metal groaned, but held his weight. He descended quickly, years of training helping him move smoothly despite his size. His feet hit dirt just as shouts erupted above. They'd found Tony. The pre-dawn gloom provided cover as Zeke moved away from the mill. No running. Running drew attention. He walked steadily through shadows until he reached his truck, pulse gradually slowing. The drive home was careful, methodical. Zeke took back roads, watching his mirror for tails. His knuckles were split and swelling. His ribs ached where the enforcer's elbow had connected. But he had what he needed. Evidence of their operation, confirmation of their plans. Morning light crept across the road as he drove, painting the world in soft oranges and pinks. The adrenaline faded slowly, replaced by a familiar calm. It was the feeling he used to get after successful operations. Mission accomplished. Intelligence gathered. One step closer to the goal. Zeke's boots scraped against his kitchen floor as he eased into a chair, wincing. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the bruises forming on his knuckles. His ribs protested as he reached for his laptop, every movement a reminder of the mill fight. The memory card from the hidden camera felt tiny in his large hands. He inserted it carefully, remembering how many cases he'd cracked with surveillance footage during his FBI days. The files loaded slowly, his rural internet crawling at a snail's pace. The first video clips appeared grainy but clear enough. 3 men huddled around a desk, sorting through papers. Zeke increased the volume. "These serial numbers better match the manifests," one man growled. "Vincent wants this shipment clean through customs." "Already handled. Got our guy at the port ready. 20 crates of farm equipment coming in next week." Zeke leaned closer, squinting at the papers they shuffled. His trained eye caught glimpses of weapons specs, automatic rifles disguised as machinery parts. He'd seen similar schemes during his federal days. The sharp roar of an engine shattered his concentration. A black SUV blazed past his house, tires kicking up gravel. Zeke stood slowly, moving to the window. The vehicle hit his mailbox deliberately, metal crumpling as it sped away. "Amateur intimidation," he muttered. The Borellis were getting nervous, resorting to schoolyard bully tactics. He returned to the footage, downloading everything to an encrypted drive. 2 hours later, the crunch of tires on his driveway drew him outside again. The afternoon heat hit him like a wall as he stepped onto his porch. His truck sat in the driveway, listing oddly to one side. All 4 tires were slashed, deep cuts in the rubber still fresh. A police cruiser pulled up before he could inspect the damage closer. Sheriff Maddox stepped out, adjusting his mirrored sunglasses with exaggerated casualness. "Now this is just awful," Maddox drawled, gesturing at the tires. "Seems like you're having a run of bad luck lately, Holt." Zeke crossed his arms, saying nothing. His silence clearly unnerved the sheriff. "Look," Maddox continued, voice dropping. "I'm trying to help here. Smart man like you should know when to let things go. Some situations," he paused meaningfully, "they're better left alone, for everyone's safety." "That a threat, Sheriff?" Zeke's voice was quiet but carried weight. Maddox's false smile tightened. "Just friendly advice. Hate to see more accidents happen to a respected member of our community." He touched the brim of his hat. "You have yourself a good day now." The cruiser's engine revved as Maddox departed. Zeke watched until it disappeared around the bend, then got to work. The spare tires in his barn had survived the fire. He spent the next 2 hours changing them out, sweat soaking his shirt in the Georgia heat. His muscles protested every movement, but the physical labor helped him think. The Borellis were escalating, which meant his morning raid had rattled them. Good. Let them waste time with petty vandalism while he gathered real evidence. By late afternoon, Zeke had repositioned his security cameras. He'd installed them after the fire. Old habits dying hard. Now he adjusted their angles, ensuring better coverage of the access roads. His phone buzzed with their feeds as he tested each one. The sun was setting when he finally sat down at his laptop again. He created a new email account through an anonymous server, something he'd done countless times during investigations. The message was brief, professional. He attached selected clips from the mill footage, especially clear shots of the weapons documentation. His cursor hovered over the send button. The recipient was a federal contact from his past, someone he'd trusted once, someone who might still be willing to help, or might sell him out completely. The risk had to be taken. The email sent with a quiet whoosh. Thunder rolled in the distance, promising another summer storm. Zeke checked his phone, cycling through camera feeds. A familiar black SUV crept past his property line for the third time that evening, headlights cutting through the growing darkness. He watched the vehicle's slow progress on his screen, noting how it lingered at each corner of his land. They were studying his routines, looking for weaknesses. Amateur work again. They'd have been smarter to vary their vehicle choice. The thunder grew closer as Zeke documented each pass in his journal. Times, descriptions, plate numbers when visible. Evidence building piece by piece, just as he'd been trained. Let them think their intimidation was working. Let them believe he was just a simple farmer in over his head. Another camera ping. The SUV made another pass, slower this time. Testing his patience, looking for a reaction. Zeke simply watched through his digital eyes, calm and focused. The headlights swept across his porch like searchlights before disappearing into the night. A sharp crack of thunder shook the windows. Rain began falling, heavy drops drumming on the roof. Zeke's security feeds showed empty roads now, the SUV finally gone. He switched between camera views one more time, checking angles, confirming coverage. The storm intensified, but Zeke barely noticed. His attention was locked on the screens before him, watching, waiting. Years of experience told him that tonight's surveillance was just the beginning. The real pressure would come soon enough. Morning mist clung to the scorched earth as Zeke walked his property line. His boots left deep prints in the damp soil, while he checked each security camera's position. The bruises from yesterday's fight made every step an exercise in stubbornness, but he pushed through the pain. A car engine hummed in the distance, growing louder. Zeke tensed, moving behind a large oak tree. Through the branches, he watched an unfamiliar blue sedan approach. The vehicle stopped at his gate, and a young woman stepped out, clutching a leather messenger bag. She walked with purpose toward his house, her dark hair tied back professionally. Zeke emerged from his hiding spot, keeping his distance. "Mr. Holt?" she called out. "I'm Marisol Vega with the County Herald." She held up a press badge. "I'd like to talk about what happened to your farm." "Not interested in press coverage," Zeke replied firmly. "Had enough attention lately." Marisol didn't budge. "What if I told you Sheriff Maddox has been taking payments from 3 different criminal organizations, including the ones who burned your property?" Zeke studied her face carefully, years of interrogation experience helping him read her expression. Her eyes held steady, no signs of deception. "Come inside," he said finally. "But leave your phone in the car." 10 minutes later, they sat at his kitchen table. Marisol spread out documents showing bank transfers, property records, and surveillance photos. Her research was thorough, methodical. "I've been tracking corruption in this county for 8 months, she explained, pointing to a particularly damning bank statement. Maddox has offshore accounts receiving regular deposits from shell companies, all traced back to organized crime. Zeke picked up a photo showing the sheriff meeting with known criminals. "This is good work. Professional-level surveillance. I learned from the best," Marisol said. "Did a fellowship with FBI investigators before choosing journalism." She paused, studying him. "Which is why I know exactly who you are, Agent Holt." The kitchen grew very quiet. Zeke's expression didn't change, but his shoulders tensed slightly. "Ex-agent," he corrected. "Been out for years." The Black River operations were legendary in law enforcement circles, Marisol continued. "Your team took down some of the biggest criminal networks in the Southeast. Until it fell apart." Zeke cut her off. "Ancient history now." Marisol nodded, accepting the boundary. "What matters is the present. I have evidence. You have experience. Together, we could expose this whole operation." Zeke stood, walking to his office. He returned with his laptop and the encrypted drive containing last night's footage. Show me what else you've got. They spent the next several hours building a comprehensive timeline. Marisol's investigative skills complemented Zeke's tactical knowledge perfectly. She had a knack for connecting seemingly unrelated details into clear patterns. See these property purchases? She pointed to a cluster of dates. All within weeks of new criminal operations starting in those areas. The Borellis are expanding systematically. Using Maddox to clear the way, Zeke added, remembering the envelope exchange he'd witnessed. He makes sure local law enforcement looks the other way. Marisol pulled up another document. Exactly. And your farm sits right in the middle of their planned expansion route. The fire wasn't random. They needed your land. They worked through lunch, spreading papers across the table, building their case piece by piece. Zeke found himself impressed by Marisol's determination. She had the same fire for justice he'd once felt as a young agent. We need to be careful how we present this, Zeke cautioned as afternoon light slanted through the windows. Federal authorities might be compromised. My old contact hasn't responded to the evidence I sent. I have secure channels, Marisol assured him. Independent investigators who can't be bought. Plus, my editor will run the story once we have everything solid. Zeke nodded slowly. Having it hit the press and law enforcement simultaneously could work. Nobody can bury it if it's already public. They spent another hour organizing their findings into a clear report. Marisol's journalistic eye helped shape the narrative, while Zeke's experience highlighted the most prosecutable offenses. This is more than enough for federal warrants, Marisol said, reviewing their work. Probably looking at RICO charges once they start pulling threads. The sun was setting when they finally finished. Marisol gathered her materials carefully, making sure nothing was left behind. I'll dig deeper into those shell companies tomorrow, she said. There might be more connections we can expose. Watch your back, Zeke warned as they walked to her car. These people play rough when cornered. I know how to stay under the radar, she assured him, starting her engine. I'll be back tomorrow with whatever I find. Zeke stood in his driveway as Marisol's sedan pulled away. The taillights grew smaller until they vanished around the bend, leaving him alone with the crickets and cooling evening air. For the first time since the fire, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe justice wasn't as far away as he'd thought. Dawn painted the sky in shades of orange as Zeke sat at his kitchen counter, spooning cold cereal while checking the security footage from overnight. His muscles still ached from the mill fight, but determination pushed the pain aside. He clicked through each camera feed methodically, noting every vehicle that had passed during the dark hours. 3:15 a.m., same black SUV, he muttered, jotting down the plate number. The vehicle had circled his property twice. Borelli scouts, most likely. He finished his cereal and grabbed his gear, a small camera with a powerful zoom lens, his old FBI notebook, and a bottle of water. The morning air was crisp as Zeke hiked through the woods behind the abandoned mill. He knew these paths well now, having mapped them during his surveillance. Finding a concealed spot on a small ridge overlooking the loading area, he settled in behind a fallen oak trunk. The position gave him a clear view while keeping him hidden in the morning shadows. At exactly 7:45 a.m., the first truck arrived, right on schedule. Zeke started recording as more vehicles pulled in. Men in work clothes emerged, looking casual but moving with purpose. He recognized several faces from his previous observations. The camera clicked quietly as he documented everything. "Got you," he whispered, zooming in as Vincent Borelli himself stepped out of a black SUV. The crime boss supervised as his men began unloading wooden crates from the trucks. Zeke's trained eye caught glimpses of what lay inside, gun barrels gleaming in the morning light. For 2 hours, Zeke photographed the operation. His FBI training guided every shot. Clear angles of faces, license plates, identifying marks on the crates. He noted times, locations, and patterns in his small notebook. The evidence was undeniable. The sound of distant engines signaled the operation's end. Zeke waited another 30 minutes after the last vehicle left, before moving from his position. His joints protested as he stood, stiff from holding still for so long. The walk back to his truck took longer than usual, as he chose a winding path to avoid being spotted. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the sun had climbed high overhead. Marisol's blue sedan was already waiting. She stepped out as he parked, holding up a thick manila envelope. "You look like you've been busy," she said, noting his muddy boots and tired expression. "Could say the same for you," Zeke replied, gesturing toward the house. Inside his kitchen, they spread their new findings across the table. Zeke connected his camera to the laptop while Marisol laid out banking documents. "These are Maddox's transaction records," she explained, pointing to highlighted lines. "Money moving through accounts in the Cayman Islands, Panama, Switzerland, classic laundering pattern." "Look at these timestamps," Zeke said, pulling up his morning photos. "Each offshore deposit matches a shipment date. Your financial trail connects directly to their gun-running operation." They worked through the afternoon, organizing evidence into a comprehensive file. Marisol's journalistic skills helped structure the narrative, while Zeke added tactical details from his law enforcement experience. Together, they built an airtight case. "Federal prosecutors will jump on this," Marisol said, reviewing their work. "The evidence chain is perfect, no loose ends." Zeke nodded, but years of experience made him cautious. "We need to deliver this personally. Too many ways it could get buried if we send it through regular channels." "I've got a contact at the Atlanta field office," Marisol offered. "She's trustworthy, used to work organized crime cases with me. We can drive up first thing tomorrow." They spent another hour making copies of everything, storing backups in secure locations. Zeke showed Marisol how to encrypt the digital files using his old FBI protocols. The weight of what they'd assembled hung in the air. Enough evidence to bring down not just the Borellis, but the entire corrupt network they'd built. "7:30 tomorrow?" Marisol asked as they finished. "We can take my car. Less likely to be recognized than your truck." "I'll be ready," Zeke agreed. "Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not even your editor." The sun was setting as they walked to Marisol's car, casting long shadows across the burned fields. Zeke watched her drive away, taillights disappearing around the bend. The evening air grew still, heavy with humidity. He remained in the driveway, scanning the tree line, listening intently. Years of field work had honed his instincts, and something felt off about the quiet. A distant owl called. Crickets chirped steadily. Everything looked normal, but Zeke's neck prickled with unease. He stood motionless in the growing darkness, reading the silence like a book. The peaceful scene felt wrong somehow. Too peaceful, too still, as if nature itself was holding its breath. As morning sunlight streamed through Zeke's kitchen window, he double-checked the evidence file one last time. His coffee sat untouched, growing cold beside his laptop. The documentation was meticulous. Photos, financial records, surveillance footage, all organized chronologically. Years of FBI training showed in every detail. His phone buzzed. A text from Marisol. "On my way. Road's clear." Zeke stepped onto his porch to wait, breathing in the fresh morning air. Birds sang in the distance, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wild honeysuckle. The burned sections of his farm still scarred the landscape, but even there, tiny green shoots were beginning to emerge from the scorched earth. Marisol's car appeared right on schedule. She parked and quickly joined him inside, carrying her laptop and an external drive. "I encrypted everything last night using those protocols you showed me," she said, setting up her equipment next to his. Triple-checked the security measures. They spent the next hour finalizing the package. Zeke's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he compressed files and added layers of protection. Marisol watched, taking notes on the process. "Your contact ready?" Zeke asked, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Marisol nodded, showing him a message on her phone. "Agent Sarah Rodriguez is standing by. She's got a secure channel open for the next 20 minutes. Zeke took a deep breath and initiated the transfer. Progress bars crept across both screens as gigabytes of damning evidence moved through encrypted pathways. Neither spoke until the confirmation appeared. "Transfer complete. Now we wait," Marisol said, but her voice held a note of excitement she couldn't quite suppress. They didn't have to wait long. By early afternoon, word spread through town like wildfire. Jenny at the local diner called Marisol. Federal vehicles had been spotted at the county line. Tom from the hardware store drove by to mention state police cars gathering at the highway junction. Zeke listened to each report calmly, showing nothing on his face. But inside, a warm satisfaction began to grow. When Mrs. Patterson from the farm supply store stopped by with fresh bread and whispered, "We're all behind you, Zeke," he felt something shift in his chest, the first crack in his careful isolation. More visitors came as the afternoon wore on. People he'd barely spoken to in years stopped by, offering support in small ways. Bill Henderson brought lumber, saying simply, "For when you're ready to rebuild." Sarah from the post office delivered a box of home-canned vegetables. Each visitor shared another piece of news. Borelli men seen hurriedly leaving town, suspicious buildings suddenly emptying out, the sheriff's office unusually quiet. Marisol worked from Zeke's porch, monitoring police frequencies and official channels. "They're moving units into position," she reported. "Carefully, quietly. But it's happening." As evening approached, Zeke allowed himself to imagine a future beyond revenge. He walked his property, planning where to start the rebuilding. The setting sun cast long shadows across the damaged fields, but now they seemed less like scars and more like lines on a blueprint. He began clearing debris from around the burned barn, each piece of charred wood removed feeling like a step toward restoration. Marcus, his nearest neighbor, came over with his tractor, helping to move larger pieces of wreckage. They worked in comfortable silence as crickets began their evening chorus. The physical labor felt good, constructive rather than destructive for the first time in weeks. "My boys and I can help with the rebuilding," Marcus said as they finished. "Just say when." Zeke nodded, touched by the offer. "Appreciate that, Marcus. Truly do." After Marcus left, Zeke sat on his porch watching darkness settle over his land. The air felt lighter somehow, cleaner. A whippoorwill called from the woods, and fireflies began to dance above the fields. For the first time since the attack, his muscles relaxed slightly. He thought about his wife, wondering what she would say about all this. She'd always believed in justice, even when it seemed impossible. "The truth finds its way to light," she used to say. "Just got to clear the path for it." Inside, he made a simple dinner and began sketching rough plans for the new barn. His old FBI training had served its purpose, but now he could feel those sharp edges starting to soften again. The warrior could rest, the farmer could return. His secure phone chirped, the old one he'd kept from his FBI days. The message was brief, encrypted in a code he hadn't used in years. It took him a moment to translate it, but when he did, his breath caught slightly. From Agent Cooper. Stand by. Change incoming. The quietness of the evening seemed to deepen around those 4 words. Zeke set the phone down carefully, keeping his breathing steady. The instructions were clear. Wait and be ready. That's what he would do. He spent the next hour methodically preparing for bed, following his usual routine. His mind stayed focused on the present moment, refusing to spiral into speculation. The message would mean what it would mean. Tomorrow would reveal its own truth. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon when Zeke woke, muscles tense with anticipation. He'd barely slept, listening for sirens that never came. The pre-dawn silence felt wrong, too thick, too empty. He dressed quickly in old work clothes, his movements automatic as he scanned the news on his phone. Nothing. No reports of raids, no arrests, not even a whisper of police activity. The quiet gnawed at his gut. The coffee maker sputtered to life as Zeke checked his surveillance feeds. The cameras showed only darkness and the occasional deer. He'd expected to see flashing lights, tactical teams moving in formation, justice finally arriving. Instead, there was just the usual morning stillness. His first call to Marisol went straight to voicemail. He tried again while pouring his coffee, frowning when it rang endlessly. Not like her to be out of reach, especially today. The gravel crunched under his boots as he walked to check the mailbox. The morning dew had settled heavy on the grass, soaking the hem of his jeans. 20 yards out, he noticed something wrong. The mailbox door hung crooked, metal warped where someone had forced it open. Inside, pushed to the back, lay a single piece of paper. The message was crude, letters cut from magazines and pasted in uneven rows. "Dead men don't need farms." Zeke's jaw tightened as he read it again. The paper trembled slightly in his large hands, not from fear, but from the rage building in his chest. He tried Marisol's phone again. Voicemail. The drive to her motel took 12 minutes. Zeke counted every second, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Yellow police tape already crossed her door. Never a good sign. The night manager wrung his hands as he explained. Guests had reported sounds of struggle around 3 a.m., but by the time police arrived, the room was empty. Inside, the scene told its own story. Chair overturned, lamp shattered, laptop missing. Signs of a brief, violent struggle. Then drag marks leading to the back door. Zeke's trained eye caught details others might miss. The depth of scuff marks suggesting at least 3 attackers. A small blood smear indicating Marisol had fought back. He photographed everything methodically, his hands steady despite the fury building inside him. The local officers had done a cursory job at best, deliberately sloppy work. One more piece of evidence pointing to the corruption's reach. The drive back to his farm felt endless. Each mile brought darker thoughts, memories of other cases where witnesses disappeared. He'd seen too many people vanish, too many lives erased by those with power and connections. Not this time. Not Marisol. His truck's tires threw gravel as he pulled into his driveway. Even from a distance, he could see more destruction. What remained of his house had been methodically torn apart, support beams chopped through with deliberate malice. The morning sun cast harsh shadows through the broken structure, like ribs of some giant, wounded beast. Zeke approached slowly, noting fresh tire tracks, boot prints in the soft earth, multiple vehicles, at least 6 men. They'd taken their time, confident no one would stop them. The message carved deep into a fallen beam caught his eye. "FBI or not, you're next." His phone buzzed. The message from his old mentor, Agent Cooper, was brief but cut deeper than any knife. "Walk away. This goes higher than you know." Zeke stood very still, letting the full weight of betrayal settle over him. Cooper had been more than a mentor. He'd been like a father during Zeke's early FBI years. They'd worked cases together, shared meals, trusted each other with their lives. Now those words on the screen revealed a rot that went deeper than he'd imagined. The morning grew warmer as Zeke walked the perimeter of his ruined home. He documented everything with his phone, each photo a promise of retribution. Birds called in the distance, oblivious to the human darkness that had visited this place. The sun climbed higher, heat building as morning gave way to afternoon. Zeke moved through the wreckage like a ghost, touching broken pieces of his life. Here, a photo frame crushed underfoot. There, his wife's old recipe box, contents scattered and trampled. Each discovery stoked the fire growing inside him. Hours passed. The shadows shifted. Zeke worked methodically, salvaging what he could, analyzing the destruction. The attackers had been thorough but arrogant, leaving clear evidence of their methods and numbers. They wanted him to see their power, to feel helpless against their reach. Evening brought a cooler breeze, carrying the scent of distant rain. Zeke stood among the ruins of his farm, his massive frame silhouetted against the darkening sky. His fists clenched and unclenched rhythmically, each breath carrying the heat of his contained fury. The betrayals, from Cooper, from the system he'd served, from everyone who should have stood for justice, burned in his chest like swallowed fire. Night settled fully around him, but Zeke remained standing in the destruction. His breathing came slow and heavy, each exhale carrying decades of controlled rage. He was no longer the quiet farmer they'd mistaken him for, nor the by-the-book FBI agent he'd once been. They'd burnt away those softer parts, leaving something harder, something dangerous. In the darkness, his fists remained clenched, his body coiled with purpose. Each breath drew in the scent of destruction and betrayal, fueling the inferno building inside him. The dashboard clock showed 4:17 a.m. as Zeke sat in his truck, parked behind what remained of his barn. His large frame hunched forward, eyes burning from lack of sleep. 26 hours had passed since Marisol's disappearance. Every minute felt like a hammer blow to his conscience. The truck's cabin glowed blue from his laptop screen as he reviewed his intelligence maps. Red dots marked confirmed Borelli locations, the old mill, 3 storage facilities, a strip club outside town. Yellow markers showed suspected sites. He'd spent weeks building this data, photographing vehicles, tracking patterns. Now it wasn't just information, it was ammunition. His fingers, thick but precise, tapped through surveillance photos, supply trucks, known enforcers, license plates. He paused on an image from 2 days ago. Ray Dillard, one of Vincent Borelli's main lieutenants, outside the abandoned Morgan & Sons warehouse. The camera had caught him directing workers to unload unmarked crates at 3 a.m. No legitimate business operated like that. Zeke rubbed his tired eyes, feeling the weight of what came next. In the truck's back seat lay a large green duffel bag he'd sworn never to open again. Inside waited the tools of his former life. Weapons, tactical gear, everything he'd needed for high-risk operations. He'd kept them maintained out of habit, telling himself it was just procedure. Now he knew better. Some part of him had always known this day would come. The laptop showed live feeds from his remaining cameras. Most watched empty roads, but one, hidden in trees near the warehouse, captured regular traffic. Box trucks arriving, armed men patrolling. Too much activity for an abandoned building. More importantly, he'd spotted Dillard's distinctive red Cadillac parked there twice since Marisol vanished. Moving deliberately, Zeke stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness. The air felt thick, promising another hot Georgia day. He walked to his workshop, unlocking a reinforced door he'd installed years ago. Inside, metal sheets and welding equipment waited. He'd prepared for this, even while hoping he'd never need it. For the next hour, he worked with focused intensity. Metal plates were bolted to his truck's doors and undercarriage. Not military-grade armor, but enough to stop most small arms fire. The rear windows got steel mesh covers. Simple innovations from his FBI days, when vehicle protection could mean the difference between life and death. As he worked, memories surfaced of other operations, other preparations. The familiar weight of responsibility settled across his shoulders. He'd led teams into worse situations, faced more dangerous opponents. But back then, He'd had backup, resources, the weight of the law behind him. Now he stood alone. Zeke moved to the duffel bag, unzipping it with reluctant reverence. The contents lay exactly as he'd packed them years ago. Combat knife, tactical vest, lock picks, flex cuffs, medical supplies. His old service weapon rested in its foam cutout, cleaned and oiled despite years of disuse. He checked each item methodically, muscle memory taking over. New additions joined the old gear. Maps marked with entry points and escape routes. Bolt cutters. A small-shaped charge for emergency exits. His laptop, loaded with camera feeds. Everything had its purpose, its place in the plan forming in his mind. He'd taught this approach to junior agents. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. The eastern sky showed the first hint of gray as Zeke finished his preparations. He studied his reflection in the workshop window. A massive shadow of contained violence. The farmer's clothes were gone, replaced by dark tactical gear that felt like a second skin. Even his movement had changed, becoming more fluid, more purposeful. The years of peaceful retirement fell away like autumn leaves. He did one final equipment check, moving through the list with practiced efficiency. Weapons secured and accessible. Communication devices charged. Medical kit complete. Extra ammunition stored safely. The routine helped settle his mind, pushing away doubts and distractions. Focus narrowed to the mission ahead. The laptop showed fresh movement at the warehouse, a guard change, right on schedule. Zeke counted 4 armed men visible on camera, probably twice that inside. He'd faced worse odds, but every engagement needed careful planning. Rushing in would only get Marisol killed. Inside the truck's cabin, Zeke spread out detailed blueprints of the warehouse. He'd pulled them from county records, comparing old layouts to his recent observations. 3 main entrances, loading dock and back, high windows along the north wall. The building's age meant plenty of structural weaknesses to exploit. He marked approach routes and potential choke points, thinking through each step. The dashboard clock now read 5:43 a.m. Guard changes complete. Most night shift workers would be tired, less alert. Day shift wouldn't be fully awake yet. The perfect window for insertion was approaching. Zeke started the engine, letting it warm up as he made final adjustments to his gear. His phone lay silent on the passenger seat, Cooper's betrayal still burning on the screen. Zeke deleted the message with a hard tap. No more waiting for system justice. No more trusting corrupt authorities. The time for proper channels had passed. The truck's headlights cut through lingering darkness as Zeke pulled onto the main road. Each mile marker brought him closer to the warehouse, closer to confrontation. The weight of his tactical vest felt familiar against his chest, like greeting an old friend you'd hoped never to see again. Dawn began its slow creep across the Georgia sky, painting clouds in pale gold and pink. Zeke drove steadily, his large hands relaxed on the wheel, despite the tension building in his chest. The first ray of true sunlight pierced the horizon, catching in his rearview mirror like a signal flare. The warehouse waited ahead, still wrapped in pre-dawn shadows. Zeke's modified truck ate up the distance, moving with deliberate purpose toward the coming storm. Zeke eased his reinforced truck behind a thick line of pine trees, killing the engine. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive concrete shell against the brightening sky. His trained eyes picked out security cameras, noting their blind spots. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, moving in predictable patterns. Through his binoculars, he studied the side entrance. Rust had eaten away at the metal door frame, creating gaps in the security. The lock looked basic, nothing his picks couldn't handle. He checked his watch. 6:17 a.m. The morning shift change would create just enough confusion to work with. Moving like a shadow despite his size, Zeke crossed the open ground in controlled bursts. Years of tactical training took over, each step precise, each pause calculated. The morning dew soaked through his boots as he pressed against the warehouse wall. Ahead, a guard turned the corner, yawning. The man never saw Zeke move. One massive arm locked around his throat, cutting off sound and air. The guard's feet kicked uselessly as Zeke applied precise pressure to the carotid arteries. Within seconds, unconsciousness claimed him. Zeke lowered the limp body behind a dumpster, securing him with flex cuffs. The lock took 12 seconds to pick, slower than his FBI days, but still effective. Zeke eased the door open, wincing at a slight creak. The warehouse interior spread before him, filled with stacked crates and industrial shelving. Light filtered through high windows, creating patches of shadow perfect for concealment. Footsteps approached. Zeke melted behind a support column, controlling his breathing. An enforcer walked past, coffee cup in one hand, phone in the other. The man's casual attitude spoke volumes about their sense of security. That overconfidence would cost them. Zeke struck like a freight train. His right hand clamped over the enforcer's mouth, while his left arm snaked around the man's chest. The coffee cup hit the floor as they struggled. The enforcer tried to twist free, but Zeke's grip was like iron. A quick shift of weight, a precise application of pressure, and another body slumped unconscious. But the fallen cup had made noise. A voice called out from behind a stack of crates. "Joey! You all right over there?" Zeke moved fast, closing distance as another enforcer rounded the corner. The man's eyes widened in recognition, hand reaching for a holstered pistol. Too slow. Zeke's shoulder drove into his midsection, lifting him off his feet. They crashed into wooden crates, splintering boards. The enforcer was younger, faster, but Zeke had mass and experience. He absorbed a wild punch, countering with a short, devastating strike to the liver. The man folded, gasping. Zeke's follow-up punch dropped him completely. The entire fight lasted less than 10 seconds. Breathing steadily, Zeke oriented himself. The warehouse blueprint remained clear in his mind. The office area lay ahead, through the main storage floor. He moved carefully between towering shelves, scanning for threats. The ceiling creaked overhead. More guards patrolled the upper catwalks. A muffled sound caught his attention. Through a grimy window, he glimpsed movement in the main office. A figure tied to a chair. Marisol. 2 armed men stood nearby, looking bored. Zeke's jaw tightened at her visible bruises, but he forced down the anger. Emotion got people killed in these situations. He found another side door, lock yielding to his picks. The office area smelled of cigarettes and stale coffee. Voices drifted from around the corner. "Boss says we move her at noon," one guard said. "Until then, we just keep her quiet. She ain't going nowhere," the second man laughed. "Not after the beating Dillard gave her." Rage flared in Zeke's chest, but his movements remained controlled. He pulled a small mirror from his vest, using it to check around the corner. Both guards faced away from him, watching Marisol. Their weapons hung loose in casual grips. Zeke closed the distance in 3 silent steps. His hands shot out, grabbing both men's heads and slamming them together with precise force. They dropped like stones. He caught their weapons before they could clatter on the floor, lowering them quietly. Marisol's eyes widened as he stepped into view. Rope bound her to a metal chair, and dark bruises marked her face. But her gaze held steady recognition and relief. "Took you long enough," she whispered as he cut her free, trying to smile despite split lips. "Had to wait for the right moment," Zeke replied softly, checking her injuries. "Can you walk?" She nodded, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. "They didn't break anything. Listen, my phone's in that desk. I managed to activate it earlier, started broadcasting. Got some good audio of them discussing operations. Zeke retrieved the phone, noting it was still transmitting. Smart thinking. We need to move now, though. Can you make it to the... He froze, hearing what she heard. Boots on metal stairs, voices calling out, the heavy sound of multiple people moving with purpose. They're coming, Marisol breathed. The whole crew for the morning shift. Zeke's mind raced through options. The side exit was too far. The main doors would be covered. They had seconds to decide. He grabbed Marisol's arm, pulling her toward a stack of metal shipping containers. Behind these, now! They pressed into the narrow space as footsteps thundered closer. Zeke positioned himself to shield Marisol, drawing his weapon. The phone kept broadcasting in her pocket as armed men flooded into the warehouse floor. The warehouse erupted in chaos as gunfire shattered the morning quiet. Bullets pinged off metal containers while Zeke shielded Marisol with his massive frame. The sharp smell of cordite filled the air. Stay low, Zeke commanded, scanning their surroundings. Metal pipes lay scattered near a broken pallet. Improvised weapons waiting to be used. When I move, you move. Understand? Marisol nodded, her phone still recording. Got it. Footsteps thundered closer. Find them, a voice bellowed. Check every corner. Zeke grabbed a length of pipe, testing its weight. The familiar calm of combat settled over him, a state where time seemed to slow and clarity sharpened every sense. He heard boots scuffing concrete to his left, smelled nervous sweat, caught the reflection of movement in a puddle of oil. The first attacker rounded the corner fast, gun sweeping. Zeke exploded into motion. The pipe whistled through the air, connecting with the man's wrist. Bones crunched. The gun clattered away. Before the enforcer could scream, Zeke's fist crashed into his jaw, dropping him cold. There! Someone shouted. More gunfire erupted. Zeke yanked a heavy chain from a nearby crate. Move! He shouted to Marisol. They darted between containers as bullets sparked off metal. The chain whirled in Zeke's grip, becoming a devastating weapon. He caught one attacker across the face, sending him spinning. Another rushed in with a knife. Zeke wrapped the chain around the blade, yanking it away before driving his knee into the man's sternum. Marisol kept her phone up, capturing everything. Left side, she warned. Zeke spun, snatching up a broken board. An enforcer charged with a baseball bat. Zeke parried the swing, wood splintering. His counter-strike crushed into the man's ribs. The enforcer stumbled back, gasping. Zeke's follow-up sent him crashing through a stack of empty boxes. You're all going down, one of the attackers shouted, panic edging his voice. The whole operation, the sheriff, everything. Keep recording, Zeke told Marisol as he grabbed another pipe. 3 more men rushed their position. Zeke met them like an avalanche of controlled violence. The pipe cracked against kneecaps and elbows. His massive fists found vulnerable points, throats, kidneys, solar plexuses. Bodies hit the floor in rapid succession. Smoke began filling the warehouse. Someone had triggered a security system. Zeke oriented himself through the haze, remembering the blueprint. Side exits 30 yards that way. Ready? Marisol coughed but nodded firmly. They moved together, Zeke leading with the pipe held ready. A figure loomed through the smoke. Zeke swung low, sweeping the man's legs. As the enforcer fell, Zeke caught him by the throat, slamming him against a wall. Who ordered the hit on my farm? Zeke demanded. Borelli, the man choked out. Vincent Borelli, working with Maddox to clear the land for... A burst of gunfire cut him off. Zeke dropped him and pulled Marisol behind a forklift. The smoke grew thicker. Visibility dropped to feet. But this played to Zeke's advantage. His FBI training had covered combat in limited visibility. He moved like a ghost through the haze, the sounds of his attacks followed by thuds and cries of pain. Marisol stumbled on debris. Zeke scooped her up with one arm, never breaking stride. A door appeared through the smoke, the side exit. 2 guards blocked it. Zeke charged forward, his shoulder dropping like a battering ram. The impact sent both men flying. More shouts behind them. More gunfire. Zeke kicked the door open, fresh air rushing in, but 4 more enforcers waited outside, weapons raised. Zeke didn't hesitate. Still carrying Marisol, he dove behind a concrete barrier. In one fluid motion, he grabbed a loose brick and hurled it. The projectile caught the nearest gunman in the face. Zeke surged up, pipe singing through the air. Bones snapped. Men screamed. His fists and feet became brutal instruments of precision. The last enforcer tried to run. Zeke's thrown pipe caught him behind the knees, sending him sprawling. In seconds, all 4 lay groaning or unconscious on the pavement. "You okay?" Zeke asked Marisol, checking her for new injuries. "Got everything," she said, still filming. "All their faces, the confessions, everything." More voices echoed from inside the warehouse. Flashlight beams cut through the smoke pouring from the doorway. Zeke spotted his truck through the trees, their escape route waiting. "Hold tight to me," he ordered. Marisol gripped his jacket as he lifted her again. Despite his size, Zeke moved with surprising speed across the open ground. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. He zigzagged, using pre-planned routes to break the shooter's aim. They reached the tree line. Zeke's modified truck sat waiting, armor panels glinting dully. He yanked the door open and helped Marisol inside. More gunfire erupted from the warehouse. Bullets pinged off the reinforced body panels like angry wasps. Zeke slid behind the wheel, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life as muzzle flashes lit up the warehouse windows. He threw the truck into gear, tires spinning on wet grass before finding purchase. They accelerated through the trees as shouts of rage faded behind them. The sky had lightened to full dawn. Marisol checked her phone, ensuring the footage had saved. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was steady. "We got them. All of it." Zeke kept his eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel. Blood trickled from cuts on his knuckles. His breath came in controlled measures, combat focus still humming through his veins. They burst out of the tree line onto the main road, the warehouse disappearing behind them. The truck's engine roared as Zeke navigated the winding back roads, his hands steady on the wheel despite the morning's violence. Marisol dabbed at a cut on her forehead with her sleeve, her phone clutched protectively against her chest. "They'll come after us," she said, glancing in the side mirror. "The footage is too damaging. Let them." Zeke's voice carried the weight of certainty. Blood had dried on his knuckles, and his shirt was torn from the warehouse fight. But his eyes remained sharp, alert to every movement on the road. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the pavement. They passed empty fields and abandoned barns, the landscape a blur of morning mist and golden light. Zeke checked his mirrors constantly, looking for pursuit. A glint of metal caught his eye. Multiple vehicles approaching fast from a side road. 3 black SUVs and a sleek sedan merged onto the main road behind them, engines gunning. "Borelli," Zeke growled, recognizing the convoy's formation from his FBI days. He pressed the accelerator harder, but the pursuit vehicles gained ground. "They're boxing us in," Marisol warned, watching 2 SUVs split to parallel roads through the trees. The lead vehicle, the sedan, suddenly burst forward, its engine screaming. Zeke recognized the aggressive driving style. Vincent Borelli himself was behind the wheel. Up ahead, an abandoned service station loomed, its weathered signs barely visible through years of neglect. The other SUVs emerged from the tree lines, converging on their position. Zeke's mind raced through options, analyzing angles and escape routes with tactical precision. But before he could choose, the sedan swerved sharply, cutting across their path. Zeke yanked the wheel, sending their truck into a controlled slide that brought them to a stop yards from the station's crumbling concrete islands. The convoy boxed them in completely. Car doors flew open as armed men emerged, weapons ready. Vincent Borelli stepped out of his sedan, his expensive suit pristine despite the dusty surroundings. A knife glinted in his hand. "Stay in the truck," Zeke told Marisol. "Keep recording." He stepped out onto the cracked pavement, his massive frame unfolding to its full height. "This ends now, Vincent." "You're right about that." Borelli's voice dripped with malice. He gestured to his men to hold position. "I'll handle this personally." Zeke moved away from the truck, drawing Vincent's attention with him. The morning air felt electric with tension. Gravel crunched under their feet as they circled each other. "You should have stayed down after we burned your farm," Vincent spat. "Now look what you made me do, getting my hands dirty with a washed-up Fed." "Those hands were already filthy," Zeke replied, his voice carrying across the empty lot. "Just like your deals with Maddox, your trafficking routes, all of it." Vincent lunged suddenly, knife slashing in a deadly arc. Zeke stepped back, but the blade caught his forearm, drawing blood. He countered with a powerful straight punch that Vincent barely dodged. The fight exploded into brutal close quarters. Vincent was skilled with the knife, each strike aimed at vital areas. But Zeke's size and combat experience showed. He used his longer reach to keep the blade at bay, looking for openings. They crashed into a rusted gas pump, metal groaning under their combined weight. Vincent drove the knife toward Zeke's throat. Zeke caught his wrist, muscles straining as they grappled. The mob boss was stronger than he looked, fueled by desperate rage. "Your whole empire's crumbling," Zeke growled through clenched teeth. "You feel it slipping away." Vincent headbutted him in response, splitting Zeke's lip. But the larger man absorbed the blow and countered with a devastating body shot that drove the air from Vincent's lungs. The knife clattered to the ground. Before Vincent could recover, Zeke grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the station's brick wall. The impact was thunderous. Marisol's phone captured everything from the truck. "Confess!" Zeke demanded, applying pressure. "The farm, the corruption, all of it." "Kill you!" Vincent choked out. "Kill everyone!" Zeke slammed him again. "Confess!" Vincent's eyes bulged as Zeke's grip tightened. Behind them, his men shifted uneasily, but held position, waiting for orders. "Fine," Vincent gasped. "The farm, I ordered it burned, needed the land, for distribution, paid off Maddox, the whole department." He clawed at Zeke's iron grip. "Been running everything for years." The sound of distant sirens cut through the morning air. Vincent's head snapped toward the noise, real fear crossing his face for the first time. "That's state police," Marisol called from the truck. "My broadcast went viral an hour ago. Every news station picked it up." More sirens joined the first, growing louder. Zeke kept Vincent pinned as the mob boss's men began to panic, looking to their leader for direction. "You're finished," Zeke told him quietly. "Everything you built, everyone you hurt, it all ends here." The first state police cruisers appeared on the horizon, lights flashing. More followed, a wave of law enforcement responding to Marisol's evidence. Vincent struggled harder, but Zeke held him easily until the first officers arrived, weapons drawn. "On your knees, all of you!" Commands rang out as state troopers swarmed the scene. Vincent's men surrendered, dropping their guns. Two officers approached with handcuffs. Zeke released Vincent into their custody, watching as they secured the restraints. "This isn't over!" Vincent screamed as they led him away. "You hear me? I'll bury you. I'll burn everything you—" A trooper shut the car door, cutting off his threats. More police vehicles arrived, securing the scene and Vincent's abandoned convoy. Marisol emerged from the truck, phone still recording as she documented the arrests. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Zeke and Marisol stood watching the unprecedented scene unfold. Sheriff Clint Maddox, his face twisted in impotent rage, was being led out of the courthouse in handcuffs. His badge, once a symbol of corrupted authority, had been stripped away. "Get your hands off me!" Maddox snarled at the state troopers escorting him. "I've run this town for 20 years. And now you'll run nothing," Marisol replied loud enough for everyone to hear, her phone capturing every moment. One by one, corrupt deputies were brought out in restraints. Some hung their heads in shame, while others cursed and threatened like their former boss. The honest officers who had been silenced for years now assisted in the arrests, their relief evident as they helped state police secure the scene. Townspeople gathered on the sidewalks, their numbers growing as word spread. Many approached Zeke with handshakes and tearful thanks. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the local diner, brought him coffee in a paper cup. "We wanted to help before," she said softly. "But we were all so scared." Zeke nodded, understanding. Fear's a powerful weapon, but it breaks once people stand together. By mid-morning, dark SUVs with federal plates began arriving. Agents in suits emerged, coordinating with state police. Zeke recognized his former mentor, Agent Paul Richter, among them. The older man approached slowly, tension visible in his shoulders. "You were right," Richter admitted, not quite meeting Zeke's eyes. "The Borelli connection went deeper than anyone knew. Your evidence triggered investigations in 3 states. Funny how that works," Zeke replied coldly. "When someone actually does their job." Richter flinched at the rebuke. "The Bureau wants to make this right. Full compensation for your farm. Whistleblower protection. Whatever you need." "What I needed was backup when they burned my land." Zeke's voice carried years of disappointment. "But I'll take the compensation. For rebuilding." Marisol was moving through the crowd, interviewing witnesses who finally felt safe enough to speak. Her live stream had gone viral overnight, bringing national media attention. News vans were already setting up nearby, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky. Around noon, Mayor Thompson called an emergency town meeting. The community center filled quickly as she outlined plans to restore honest leadership. When she asked for volunteers to help clean up Zeke's farm, nearly every hand went up. "We've lived under their shadow too long," the mayor declared. "Today we start fresh." Back at the farm, Zeke surveyed the scarred earth that had once been his fields. But now, instead of desolation, he saw possibility. A convoy of trucks arrived carrying townspeople armed with tools, lumber, and determination. They spread out across the property, clearing debris and preparing for reconstruction. Tom Wilson, the hardware store owner, brought posts for the new barn foundation. "These are pressure-treated," he said. "Built to last." Sarah Martinez from the feed store arrived with seed donations. "For when the soil's ready," she explained, "my whole family wants to help plant." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. What the Mafia had destroyed in violence, the community was rebuilding with hope. Marisol moved among the workers, documenting their efforts while coordinating with national news teams. "They're calling it a landmark case," she told Zeke during a water break. The evidence exposed corruption networks in Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. "The FBI's moving on organizations we didn't even know were connected." Zeke nodded, watching people work together, their fear replaced by purpose. This was more than just rebuilding a farm. It was reclaiming their dignity. As the sun began its descent, casting orange light across the cleared land, Zeke lifted the first foundation post. Its weight felt right in his hands, solid and true. The crowd gathered to watch as he positioned it over the prepared hole. "This post," he declared, his deep voice carrying across the hushed gathering, "marks more than a new beginning for my farm. It stands for all of us, for justice, for courage, for community. He drove the post home with powerful strikes, each impact resonating like a bell of freedom. When it stood straight and proud in the Georgia soil, applause erupted from the crowd. More posts were quickly raised, each one a declaration of defiance against those who had tried to rule through fear. Marisol captured the moment on camera, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "They tried to burn you out," she said. "Instead, they forged something stronger." "That's the thing about fire," Zeke replied, resting his hand on the post. "It either destroys you, or it makes you stronger. We chose stronger." The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of purple and gold, its light catching on the fresh-cut lumber and the faces of people who had reclaimed their town. Where burnt fields had stretched just days ago, the framework of a new beginning was taking shape. Zeke's gaze swept over his property, not seeing the destruction anymore, but the promise of what would rise from it. The foundation posts stood like sentinels against the darkening sky, each one a testament to resilience and unity. This was more than a victory over the Borellis and their corrupt allies. It was proof that one person's stand for justice could ignite the courage of an entire community. The farm would grow again, its roots deeper than before, nourished by the strength of people who had finally found their voice. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.